Missions by
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Missions by You. We're doing a special series where we're highlighting French Quarter nonprofits. I have with me today my co-host, Scott Tilton, from the New Orleans Foundation of Francophone Cultures, New Foundation, and we're filming in their beautiful cultural center at 602 Toulouse. And our guest today is Eric Seiferth of the Historic New Orleans Collection. He is a curator and historian.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with y'all today.
Thanks. We're excited to have you because we're going to talk about two really important collections you guys have going on right now, or exhibits rather. Do you want to give us the names of those exhibits and a little background?
Yeah, sure. So we have now at our space at 520 Royal Street, Making It Home, which is an exhibition that tells the story of the first arrivals of the Vietnamese community here in New Orleans and Louisiana 50 years ago. And then on Friday, we're opening up a new exhibition on the local civil rights movement here in New Orleans, focusing on that mid-century moment from about 54 through the late 70s, called The Trail They Blazed. And that'll be up, like I said, on Friday, and will be up for a year. So both these exhibitions are free and open to the public every day but Monday at 520 Royal Street. So we're really excited to tell these stories and to welcome visitors into our spaces.
Cool. Why do you think these two exhibits are so important to share right now, and what unique perspective do you think HNOC is bringing to them?
Well, both these exhibitions share about our diverse community here in New Orleans. And I think that's part of what is really special about them. And both of them were made in some way with those communities that are featured. We included advisory input, process of advisory input and oral histories in the production of both of them. So in the Trail They Blazed, which opens Friday, we collected over 50 hours of oral histories from people who were active in the civil rights movement. And then we went back and we worked with that same group of project participants to design the exhibition, to figure out the tone and feel and the target audience and the design and storytelling. And so when you go through there, you can hear their own voices and their words telling the story of the civil rights movement in New Orleans. Downstairs in Making It Home, it was a similar process. Our oral historian and project curator, Mark Cave, built a huge collection of oral histories of people in the Vietnamese community. All of these are available on our website, I should add, and then use those relationships to continue the advisory input process and frame out kind of the storytelling in the space. And in both places, like I said, you can hear the voices of the people featured in the stories, telling their stories. So it's a really cool moment for us as a museum who have dedicated so much, especially over the last decade plus in our oral history program, to be able to feature these oral history products in an exhibition space, which is really designed for the public to come and take in these stories in a much more accessible way than on our website. And they're on our website too for researchers and the public, but we're really excited to open the doors and let people kind of hear these stories.
It's great. And it seems like one of the recurrent themes in talking with nonprofits based in the French Quarter, there seems to be all of this emphasis on communities and the communities you serve. And one of the things I was curious about is, as you're thinking about the curatorial process and your experience with HNOC over the last 9 years, several,
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah. Like, how is the process of curating? Like, how do you go about it? And, if you take kind of any exhibit that you're working on, like how's that process look?
Yeah, I mean, the curation of an exhibition is really the kind of behind the scenes work of figuring out what the story is, how to tell the story, and in a lot of cases, who to tell the story with. And we've been really fortunate to be able to work collaboratively with different local communities on these two specific projects. So The Trail They Blazed, which is a project I was a lead curator on, so I'll speak more to that one in this answer. But that project began in 2016. It was a project that we initially called Null Resistance, and it still has that name. as kind of the umbrella project that became the Trail Day Blaze. So in 2016, we decided we were going to start collecting oral histories. Collected 50 hours of oral histories of people who were active in the civil rights movement in New Orleans, transcribed them, put them online. And then I had to figure out, it was my job then to figure out, how do we tell these stories? What stories do we tell? How do we frame them? And so what we did in this situation is we went back to that same group of people whose stories they were. And we said, we'd like to work with you on an exhibition. And we actually started out on with a traveling exhibition in mind. And we met repeatedly with this group. And like I said, figured out those questions that we always figure out as curators. What's the tone? What's your narrative? How are you going to tell your story? Because of course, every moment in history can be told 100 different ways. What perspectives are we going to use? What's our target audience? And we did that work in conjunction with, alongside, in collaboration with, this stakeholder group. And that turned into a traveling exhibition that went around New Orleans, because that group really wanted to reach New Orleanians. So that went to public library sites. It's been to local universities. It's been to area high school, community centers. And then we built that out to a space, to our space at 520 Royal, where we could include physical items, because that's part of the curatorial process too, like sharing physical items, museum items with the public, in the service of storytelling, by and large, not exclusively, but by and large. And in this case, certainly. So that process took us almost 10 years. It was a collaborative process. There's a big team at HNOC that works on that. So when I say I'm project lead, there's so many people that I work with to make it happen, including co-curator Amy Everett and Heather Green, who was on our curatorial team, and kind of to the team that like puts it all together and makes it happen. So it's a big project. It takes a long time, and hopefully by the end of it, it just feels for visitors like this is the story and this is how it should be, and feels right, and not, overly complicated, confusing, or contrived when we get there.
No, I don't know if you've made it to making it home yet, but I love the way you guys put that together, of the images and the different, I guess, artifacts or pieces, right? To like tell that story. I think the oral history is also really important, because we lose that, and it's so important to hear it in someone's own voice. Like, it's different to just read it, but to hear that person's reflections and like passion or feelings in there is so important.
It reminds me we were working with the baby dolls, and there was one of the baby dolls whose name is, I believe, Saran, and she was featured in the Vietnamese exhibit.
Oh, wow.
Because she had been born in Vietnam and then adopted by an American family, and I think her father, it was a really interesting story. And so we had talked about it prior, and she had shared that story, but to see that come to life during the exhibit, and she was very proudly standing next to her portrait. She had all the whole oral history there, but she was also there to explain it to people during the opening of the exhibit. And I thought that was really amazing to have taken that conversation, see it come to life, but also someone like beaming and telling their story next to it. So
that's awesome. I mean, as a curator, those moments are really special. Like there have been a handful of projects and moments I've had where images of people on the wall, or stories are of people that I know that are still alive, and I get to share that with them in the space. And those are kind of the most precious moments. Something you really want to make sure that it's that story and their story is honored, and when you get that right and you're with them in the space and they feel honored and feel that the story is told right, as a curator, that's a really, that's a special thing. And I feels like you hit the mark. And, we talking about spaces in the French Quarter, we know this is our center of tourism for the city. We, in terms of visitorship, we have a huge chunk of our visitorship are not New Orleanians. They're out of towners in large part because of where we're located. Yeah. I'm sure that's the same and going to continue to be the same for y'all here. And but we need to serve our local communities. And so, and it's our mission to do that. And I think we've been able to do that with some of these projects. And I think when we do that, it helps us meet our goals and grow our community. And it also makes what we're sharing with people that aren't from New Orleans that much richer and just a better exhibition.
Yeah. Well, I hope more locals come visit. I also think having that space in the French Quarter where tourists learn a deeper history of New Orleans and, just more stories that you won't see from other places. Yeah. What else ties these two exhibits, Making It Home and The Trail They Blazed? What else connects them? Sure.
Well, I mean, they're made with community, about community. They're both 20th century stories. So for those locals or people from elsewhere coming that don't want to look at a colonial document, well, this is 20th century history. We've got the colonial documents too, but these are more recent stories. It also means that a lot of the people that are featured in the stories are alive, and it means that people coming to visit are going to have touch points. Like they're gonna remember when schools were desegregated. They're going to remember when the first Vietnamese restaurant opened in their neighborhood, and these are kind of parts of the stories that we're telling in our space. So they're really framing out the last 50, 60, 70 years experience in the city.
Phenomenal. And when you think about that and the experience that the visitors have, so when they're coming into y'all space, there's sort of one question, obviously, for the Making It Home. There's like, what do you want them to take away? Like, do y'all have like a sense of what the experience that you wanted to have the visitors take away? And then for the new exhibit coming up, is there a sense of an overarching goal? Like, do you want, what would you like people to understand about the exhibit, and perhaps what's a new reflection that they would have on that period? Because that's a very seminal moment in New Orleans history that has a lot of ramifications.
Yeah, great questions. I mean, for Making It Home, we really want to kind of pinpoint this moment where, today we know New Orleans has a vibrant Vietnamese community, and to kind of go back to that moment where that wasn't the case and see how and when this change happened, and what that process was like for the people who arrived in Louisiana from so far away and settled here, and what that experience of creating community in our city and state was like, and can kind of center that story. In The Trail They Blazed, we identified really two kind of things we wanted to do with the project based on conversations with our collaborators. One was to honor the work that happened. So many people we worked with were the people that did the work to make change, and it was really important to them to honor that work. So that's part of the tone and feel that you'll get in there, and part of what we want visitors to take away is to see the amazing work that was done to make New Orleans a more equitable place for everybody, and kind of the challenges that they overcame to do that. The other half of it is to inspire specifically younger people, identified again by our collaborators, to continue to make change. And we all can continue to make change, but what we want to do is demystify the change-making process. So the show is called The Trail They Blazed because this group of trailblazers has gone out and made change in the city. And if you follow their recipe for doing that, people can continue to engage civically and work to make change in New Orleans. So we hope to kind of break down how that happens. And we use, going back to talking about narrative, like we had to figure out how are we going to tell this story so that it can help people make change. So we break it down, and in each story we ask a series of questions. What happened, or what was the problem? Who stepped up? What did they do? And how did things change? So we can kind of break down and look at the change-making process over time. And hopefully it inspires people to remain or continue or increase their civic activism and engagement, civic engagement. So we can really, always work to make our communities better.
It's phenomenal that then you can have young people engage with the adults, because a lot of them are still here.
They're still around. Yeah. That's right.
I still think about,
It's really special. It's really special to have so many people who who did so many amazing things
Yeah,
here.
I remember being in elementary school. There was a teacher, Miss Nocturne, who, if I recall correctly, she was the teacher for Ruby Bridges.
Oh, wow.
When when the white families refused to go to the school, and she was the only one child being taught in the school, she taught her.
That's
and it was
amazing.
interesting that she was an active teacher when I was young.
That's right.
That time span is not that far apart.
Not at all.
That woman could still be teaching. Yeah.
And Ruby Bridges, I believe, is in her 60s.
Yeah.
She's around. Yeah, I mean, school desegregation happened in 1960 in New Orleans. The Making It Home story starts in 1975 in New Orleans. These are recent stories and events that sometimes we forget how close they are and kind of take it for granted that our city is the way it is, but not thinking about these things that just happened.
Yeah. In the grand scheme of history, these are recent events. You know? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Something else I thought about where you were just talking, like a positive thing from this is I missed out on I wish I would have interviewed family members and recorded more stories or had them keep journals. And so I think of the people you have interviewed, their family gets these stories as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's yes to all on all counts there. Yeah, ask your parents and grandparents if they're around about what they lived through, because a lot of it it may be enlightening. And just we're really happy that we can save these stories for their families and for everyone.
Yeah.
That we can go back and like I said, these are all transcribed, they're digitized, or you can listen to them on our website and go to HNOC.NOLA-resistance.HNOC, and go to the project website for the NOLA Resistance Project. You can also go to HNOC.org and look up our current exhibitions, our oral history program, and find the oral histories for both Making It Home and the Trail They Blaze that those projects were based on, and you can listen to them and kind of at your own pace and whatever kind of topics are interesting to you. So I encourage people to go check those out.
That's really cool, having them online and accessible to people. How many people you interviewed for each project?
Well, I know for Trail They Blaze, we had 30 interviews for about 50 hours of oral history. I don't have the numbers for Making It Home. I think it is a pretty similar number, maybe slightly less, but I could be off on that. Both of these are, when we start an oral history project, we usually set a goal for kind of how many people we're going to interview or how many hours we're going to grab on the topic. And that space, about 50 hours is a really good amount that gives you insight into whatever topic you're hoping to record stories about. So we have French Quarter life stories. We have our civil rights stories. We're working on a project now about coastal land loss and gathering stories related to that. And in fact, our oral historian, Mark Cave, was just at a conference on coastal land loss, interviewing as many people as he could. So we're continuing that program and doing whatever we can to kind of capture those stories and share them with the public.
So how can people get involved with HNOC?
Well, you can come to our exhibits, our museum at 520 Royal Street. We're open every day but Monday. Our research center at 410 Charters is open Tuesday through Saturday, and that's where we make our items available to the public, researchers, typically family researchers, scholars, documentarians, younger scholars like high schoolers, etc. You can become a member. You can also just go to hnoc.org, and we have a lot of cool stuff online that people can, play around with. There's our first draft, which is kind of where we do some of our storytelling. So there's all kinds of ways that you can see the work that we're doing. And if you're interested in local New Orleans history, one of the things that we can do, and I think we do really well, if I can pat us on the back a little bit, is tell a lot of different stories and contextualize them together. So, we can tell the colonial stories, but we can also talk about what's going on in the more recent past and link those. And I think that's something that we are particularly well equipped to do. So there's whatever history or culture you're interested in New Orleans, we probably have something for you.
I can attest that as a member of the CAIO circle for young people, that the events and everything are awesome. So when it brings them together, and it's cool to find people who are interested in New Orleans and all the different types of events you'll organize are pretty amazing. So,
well, thank you.
You made me think of another question. What's something you wish more people knew about the historic New Orleans collection? Because I just learned about like how many spaces you guys have. So is there anything else you think like people don't know about the museum?
We're free. I mean, yeah, we are a free museum. We have, over a dozen buildings in the French Quarter, and there's a number of them that are open to the public. We're preservationists, so if you want to see some really cool buildings, we have a cafe over at our 520 location. You can just walk into the courtyard, sit in a historic courtyard, have a coffee drink or a lunch or whatever, and we invite you to do that. We'd love for people to come and do that, and of course check out some of our exhibitions while you're at it. But there's no charge, no appointment necessary. We are dedicated to being as accessible as we can to the local community and out of towners as well. So yeah, I just want to stress that. Come on in. We're here. Come on in.
I want to second the courtyard. One of the most beautiful, unique courtyards, I think in the quarter.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So that courtyard, I mean, it is one of, if not the most painted or depicted courtyards in the city. So when you see old postcards or old images of French Quarter courtyards, it may be our courtyard. And for many years in the 1930s, it was the courtyard where the Arts and Crafts Club met, and true pictures of the courtyard for New Orleanians that might remember some of the civil rights movement. That space was also the home of WDSU Studios from the mid-50s to the mid-90s. And they used to broadcast during Mardi Gras from our buildings. So there's a deep history of our buildings as well. And some of the buildings that we're restoring across the street at the 533 complex date back to the 18th century. And there's some really rich and complex stories in that space that we are uncovering right now and excited to share with the public when we bring that complex of buildings back online later this decade. So look out for that too. By the end of the 2020s, you will be able to go from one side of the street at 533 to the other at 520 and spend a whole day exploring different spaces and stories for free. So we're excited about that as well.
Lovely. Okay, well, before we wrap, we have a fun question for you.
Okay.
If you could go back to a different New Orleans time period, what would it be?
Oh man, well, that is a really hard question for a historian. There are a lot of time periods that I'm interested in, that I work on. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want to be there for a variety of reasons, but I guess I'll just take the easy way out here and say that I would love to go back and hear some of the early jazz musicians 110, 120, 25 years ago, and just kind of be a fly on the wall as that new music is emerging. Mm-hmm. That'll be my choice today. What about you? Are you going to answer?
I was debating, do I go all the way back to the French period, the Spanish period? And then I was the time period I've always wanted to live in is disco era. And I bet New Orleans was a time in disco. So that's my answer.
Disco in New Orleans.
Disco in New Orleans.
Happening,
yeah.
I've always been kind of similar to you, but my great aunt Esther Dupuy was a flapper, and so
Wow.
there's these photos of her in like the 20s with these like incredibly long cigarettes and all of that stuff. And it just seems like it was a vibe, you know. I
Yeah.
just like she's in the French Quarter living her best life and cutting up, and I was just like, I just want to see it. I just want to see what she was up to, you know. Like,
Just catch a drink with your
early
your
jazz,
great
yeah,
aunt.
the absinthe bar, early jazz, and there's also a photo of my grand-mère from the 1930s in Life magazine, and she's eating an oyster. And I don't know, that era kind of writ large when they were there in the 20s and early 30s always fascinated me. So that'd be kind of funny to go back to, and it'd be fun to meet them young.
Yeah, right. Yeah, see them in a different time.
Yeah.
Great answers. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we can't wait to see the exhibit. Can you give us the dates for the start dates and end dates for both exhibits one more time, though?
I can. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So you can go to our website. We're at hnoc.org. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Threads. And the two exhibits, Making It Home, is up now and up through October. It's open any day but Monday at 520 Royal Street. And then again, it is free and air conditioned. As we're getting to the summertime, it's a great time to go to museums in New Orleans.
Yes.
The Trail They Blazed is our civil rights exhibition. It opens on Friday. We're really excited. Like I said, we started the project 9 years ago. We're opening to the public on Friday. And it'll be up for a year. So it opens June 6, 2025 and is up through June 7th, 2026. And again, is at the 520 Royal Street in our Tricentennial Wing upstairs on the 3rd floor.
Well, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I've enjoyed getting to chat with y'all.
Perfect. Till next time. Thanks for listening to Missions Bayou, powered by Comfy Stone. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the podcast wherever you listen. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment, letting us know your thoughts and who you'd like to hear from next. We'll see y'all next time.